Hello, everyone. I'm Emily. I'm the office administrator for Keep Pearland Beautiful. Thanks for joining our monthly garden lecture. We upload all of our past garden lectures on our website, which is pearlandrecycles.com. Please be sure to take the survey once you complete the lecture tonight. The survey will be pinned in the comments below and in the live description. Feel free to ask any questions you might have in the comments. We will have time to answer them either during or after. I'm going to pass it over to Don Bushman here with us to start his presentation.
Well, thank you, Emily, and welcome everybody. This evening we'll talk a little bit about the pollinator gardening, and I have labeled it Southeast Texas because I'm sort of including some things from Matagorda County as well as Brazoria. And for those of you that I'm sure all of you know that Brazoria County is very closely associated with AgriLife Extension. And you can always reach us through our website or find us on Facebook. And a copy of this presentation will be available because some of the things won't have a whole lot of time to go through, but you can see them in the printed out presentation. Just to sort of get started, pollination is extremely important. It is estimated that 1 bite out of every 3 bites of food that we consume is a result of pollination. But what does a pollinator garden mean to you? Most of us think of butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds. But there are some others. Moths, wasps, flies, beetles, even bats, which is a mammal. And of course, the ever popular mosquito is actually a pollinator, but I'll let you all keep the mosquitoes and I will attend to the others. And it's kind of interesting that there's becoming a little more emphasis on bats and keeping those around. And if that is your interest, there is information available on night gardening, and they prefer a light colored flower, and you definitely do not want lights in your garden at night. And also the moths, some of those are nighttime pollinators. Pollination also, in addition to helping produce the food, involves some other things like production of fibers and biofuel and help stabilize the soil, etc. So there are things in addition to producing the food that pollination does serve a purpose. The biggest problem, I think, is the decline in pollinators. 5 species of butterflies have become extinct just since 1950. And 20% of the 800 species that are in the U.S. at present are at the risk of extinction. Nearly 200 species of hummingbirds has decreased just in the last couple of years. So there is some real problems. Even the bee population is declining, and the bumblebee population, again, has declined almost 20% in just the last 20 years. So our pollinators are at risk. And some of the things that are keys to success with the pollinator garden, the nectar flowers, and that is certainly not the only thing that the butterflies and hummingbirds and other pollinators look for. And I will not get into bees in any detail tonight because that's an area that I will leave to the beekeepers. Seasonal planting is important. Plant selection is very important. And also, and I'll stress this a little bit more, go organic. Provide water. Also, our pollinators do need a place to rest. and location of the garden is important. And protection. As I indicated, there's a big decline in the various pollinator species, and more are becoming extinct. Seasonal planting. You want to be sure that you have a variety of plants that bloom from spring through fall. For example, monarchs are prevalent in spring and fall, while many of the other butterflies are here from spring through fall. Hummingbirds are here during the fall and spring migration, and a few do remain here and breed in the summer. And there are a very few which actually overwinter here. So we do want to make sure that there is food available throughout the entire time that they are here. And bees are active from late January until the end of October or even later. So we do need flowers and pollination from January basically up to, almost to Christmas. And go native. I don't think I can emphasize this enough. As y'all are very well aware, we've had some very erratic climatic conditions the last 2 or 3 years. And the native plants are adapted to our soil and to our climate. The non-native plants may actually not even provide the nutrients that the local pollinators need. And some of the invasive plants can actually crowd out these plants that we want to keep and can bring in disease organisms. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service very strongly recommends to try and stay away from these invasive plants. And also some cultivated plants have what we call double flowers, which makes it very difficult for the butterflies and hummingbirds and even the bees to get into. So be selective when you're selecting the plants. Now, I will show in a few minutes a list of native plants, mainly for the butterflies, but essentially all of those are also accessible by hummingbirds. But the best flowers for the hummingbirds are those that hang with their clusters open and beyond the leaves. And hopefully they'll have several blossoms open at one time. The hummingbird, as you are I'm sure well aware, does not land on the plant. They are flying while they are eating. And I'm going to list here in a table several of the native nectar plants. And they are good for most of the common butterflies and hummingbirds in Brazoria County. I'm not going to go through every one on here. When you get the copy of the presentation, then you can take time to read and see. But for example, lantana. This is a good flowering plant that blooms from late spring to basically to frost. And it is a nectar plant for quite a wide variety of the butterflies and even for hummingbirds. And as you go down through here and you can see the zinnias, I know most of us, when we think of monarchs, think of milkweed. But look, monarch is attracted to zinnias as a nectar source. So I said, I'm not going to try to go through all of these, but this would be in the presentation. And you can look down through here for the butterflies that you're particularly interested in and to see when they bloom and what butterflies are most likely to be attracted. I think the big thing that most of us think about is the nectar plants. But the nectar plants are not all that is needed. The host plants, or the plants for the caterpillars, are extremely important. And without these host plants, then we are not going to sustain the butterflies. And actually, they will not hang around the garden that much if we don't have these host plants. And unlike the nectar plants, which provide nectar for quite a wide variety of butterflies, most of the host plants for caterpillars are very specific, specific for each variety of butterfly. So this makes things a little bit more complicated in your decision as to what butterflies you might really want. And generally, these are not beautiful flowers. And so they're often overlooked in these pollinator gardens, especially in planting. And if you go online and you start looking at all these beautiful pictures of these pollinator gardens, I have gone through there and I'll say 99% of them I have never seen a host plant. But without them, no future butterflies. And then these following tables also give some of the common host plants that are for the common butterflies, Brazoria and Matagorda counties. Now, again, we are looking for native plants. It's kind of interesting that in some of these cases, the plants are not native, but they've been around for so long, some of us think that they are, like parsley, dill, and even some of the citrus fruits. While not truly native to Texas, they've just been here so long that we consider them natives, and they are not invasive, but they are extremely important for some of the various species of butterflies. And here, of course, if what you may or may not be well aware of, the queen butterfly also likes milkweed. The Gulf frillatary, and I'm sure most of you are familiar, wants passion vine, but that red flower passion vine is toxic. And for some of you may not be quite familiar with the frog fruit, the common buckeye, and the frog fruit is fairly common. It almost becomes invasive, but I mean, it will spread pretty easily. And we find it throughout our yard. And we have 3 acres and we don't have the turf and things in it, but we do keep frog fruit in our pollinator garden. So again, you can look down through here and see some of the specialty host plants for some of the various caterpillars. And some of them will even go to grasses. And some of them, again, like the orange sulfur, the host plants really are not Texas natives, and they're more into the legume family. And surprisingly, maybe, there are a lot of trees and shrubs that serve as host plants. For example, oak can be a host plant for up to 468 different varieties or species of pollinators. Plums and cherries, willows, hickories, and pecans. And I'm just putting this in here again. And if you want this, please let me know. I did this for myself. I have about a 32 or 33 page, I'll just say paper that I have done on the butterflies commonly found in Brazoria and Matagorda counties. In that, I show pictures of the males, the females, the cichlids, the caterpillars, lists the native plants. It also shows their migration patterns and things like that. And there's a table of contents. So it's not quite that difficult to look through. And if anyone's interested, I can definitely make it available. I think most of us, and Emily and I were just talking about this. She was babysitting one of her neighbor's gardens, which was loaded with milkweed. And of course, milkweed is the nectar plant for monarch. It's also a nectar plant for some of the quite a few of the swallowtails, the American lady, and for the queen and some of the other species. So when you think of milkweed, it is a nectar plant for quite a wide variety of species of the butterflies. But it is the host plant for monarchs and queens. And without the milkweed, we do not have those two butterflies. And I think most of you are well aware that the monarchs do migrate. They are here and lay eggs in March and April as they're coming up from Mexico and then going north. They come back from the north in September, October, and again will lay eggs. So having milkweed blooming during those periods of time is quite important. And the queens can be active in the summer, and as hot as it is, I'm still seeing queens butterflies around. And just yesterday, the day before, I saw a caterpillar on one of our milkweeds. Thus, we need milkweeds from March to October. Now, there are over 100 species of milkweeds native to North America. 35 of these are native to Texas. And there's quite a diversity in the foliage, the flower color, how big they become, their appearance, and the bloom time. And that bloom time is definitely important. So consequently, and I'll go through some of these native species here in just a minute, you probably would like to have 2 to 3 different varieties of native species, and because they are going to bloom at different times. Okay, and this is just an example of some of the suggested native species that are found in this area. The antelope horn, that is blooming from early April through July. World milkweed is summer through September and is certainly one of the better ones for the monarchs. Showy milkweed, May through September. The butterfly milkweed is only June through August. Aquatic milkweed, and that is, unless you do have some fairly swampy type area, that's not something you're really going to have in your yard. Most of the native milkweeds are native to more of the sandy, rocky areas of Texas. And to keep these in your garden, you really need to make sure that it's well drained, with the exception of the aquatic. And most species of milkweed, mulch should not be used. And I found this out the hard way. I had a lot of milkweed. I had the mulch to prevent the weeds, and I was having all sorts of problems. I went online and I read, do not use mulch because you don't want the wet roots. I went out and took out the mulch. Within about 3 or 4 days, they were blooming and looked very well. Now, tropical milkweed, which is the one most of you are very well familiar with, and I'm sure that almost everyone has this, is not native to the US. It is native to Mexico, and if you have it, it must be cut back in the fall to prevent QE, which is a virus which affects the monarchs and is toxic to them. I sort of make the recommendation that on Thanksgiving, before you start the grill to cook the turkey, go out and prune back the your tropical milkweed. The other milkweeds do not have to be pruned back, and you would prune it back almost to ground level, leave 1 or 2 inches, but make sure there are no leaves there. The others you do not have to clip back. Oh, excuse me, that is OE. Should have been OE. I had a typographical error. Let's go back to that for just a second. That is OE, not QE. One of the things that I don't have this in the presentation. I'm sure that most of you know that you can reproduce tropical milkweed from seeds, and it's not that difficult, although it's not that easy. And all of these other milkweeds grow in areas where they have, I'm going to say 600 or 700 hours of cold temperature. And so if you do try to grow those from seeds, you do have to keep them in the refrigerator for at least 30 days and some of them for up to 70 days before you have a chance to get them to germinate. Cold stratification does help a little with tropical milkweed, but is not required because, again, it is coming from a tropical area. Another thing which I think is extremely important is to go organic. Misusing pesticides, herbicides, and even fertilizer can be harmful. And any pesticide, insecticides that that you're spraying on there to kill your other pests and insects, your mosquitoes, they do kill the bees, they do kill the butterflies and hummingbirds. And some can even be labeled organic. And for example, there is an organic fertilizer which contains a nicotine byproduct. It is toxic, especially to bees. And if you do have problems with all these mosquitoes and you want to spray, be sure you spray late in the evening, around dark, a little after. That does to help protect the butterflies and the bees. And the bats, if it's right around very early evening, you're probably not going to affect them. But if it's late in the evening or it starts to really get dark, then yes, you can affect the bats. So consider non-chemical pest controls. There are some beneficial insects, the ladybugs, and if you have ladybugs and you can collect some, be sure you put those on your milkweed and other good plants. Praying mantis, even lacewings. So there are some natural beneficial insects which do help to control the insects that we do not want, and that particularly the ones that are going to kill our pollinating plants. And herbicides, the same thing. They kill native nectar plants as well as the host plants for the caterpillars. Okay. Chemical fertilizers, I had mentioned this one about the one with the nicotine. They and the chemical fertilizers and that nicotine, that's actually an organic one. They can very definitely be very toxic to our pollinators. So be very careful. Okay, let me back up here just a second. Okay, vinegar. 30% vinegar can be used. Now, a lot of people say, oh, okay, so I get the vinegar and I dilute it down using 30%. No. If you're going to use vinegar, you go into probably the gardening section of one of the stores and you buy what is already 30% vinegar, and you use that directly as a spray. It will kill basically any plant that is sprayed on, but if you carefully spray this on your weeds, then it will kill the weeds and it is not going to harm our pollinators. It's not exactly cheap, but if it's for a small area, it's definitely recommended. And of course, you can always pull the weeds by hand. Pollinators do need water. Butterflies, and it is essential for butterflies. But butterflies cannot land in the water. They need to land and sit on something solid, like some stones. If you just have I'll say a plate, and you put stones in there, which are large enough that part of that stone is above the water, that's fine. If you want something really fancy, like the one in the picture here, you can do that. If you are using a bird bath, it is highly recommended not to use one with a pedestal. That actually you want them on the ground, and again that you do have the small stones. Now, some species of butterflies, particularly the swallowtails, need mud puddles, or what would we call them, waterless ponds, and they will drink from this muddy water. And also it is kind of used for reproductive purposes. And the swallowtails, for example, they like to have a little sand in there. So they need some minerals and salts. And believe it or not, some butterflies actually prefer to use things like urine or manure from the animals. So you don't have to have just purely purified water, but you do have to have some place for them to land. Now, on the other hand, the hummingbirds prefer a running water, drip fountain or something like that. The nectar that they eat is very sticky, so they actually like to bathe very frequently. And if you have something like a misting device, this is a very attractive source for the hummingbirds. So yes, they both want water, but in different forms. And then here's a picture of the waterless pond or puddling area, but it is very important that you keep this wet or damp. And when I was cleaning out our koi pond, all that sediment, as I was cleaning it out, there were several black swallowtails that were landing on it. They also need someplace to rest. Those butterflies can't just continue to fly all the time. Even the hummingbird can't. But a simple rock, place somewhere in the area where you're in your pollinator garden for them to land on and rest is very helpful. Hummingbirds, yes, they do need someplace to perch, and they have to stay pretty close to their food source because as quick as they wake up, they want to eat. They're like some of us. And one of the recommended resting places for the hummingbird is the redbud tree. The eastern redbud is native to Texas, and that is is one that the hummingbirds really like. And they may show some preference for other flowering trees and shrubs. So try to keep something in your garden to provide a resting place, especially if you're interested in hummingbirds. That's something different from what the butterflies need. And when they go into sleep, they go into just a deep hibernation. So they need some place that really helps to protect them, like that redbud tree. Location. Sunlight is key. Most of the native plants require full sun, which is at least 6 hours or more of sun, direct sunlight, and it mainly would be afternoon sun. And don't plant your large plants like the sunflower and things like that, where it is going to block sun from your smaller plants. So don't plant sunflowers on the west side of your garden and block the sun and then have some of your beautiful flowers right up next to it because it'll block the sun from them. Soil quality. This can range dramatically. And most of the native plants, especially what we call Texas superstars, are adaptable to a wide range and climate of conditions and soils. That is another reason to go with our native plants. Most of them prefer well drained, slightly acidic. And if you have a question for any particular flower or something like that, you can check online for the recommended pH. If you find that your soil is alkaline, and you can buy a very simple meter to check pH, organic matter, or to use sulfur. Ferrous sulfate is probably the most recommended. It does take a little bit of time, and once you put it in, to really become active in the soil. Iron sulfate is another one. Well, ferrous sulfate, but your sulfurs. If okay, yeah, and for your clay soils, if you live down around here in the Brazoria area, you probably will want to add some compost or even consider using some nutrient-rich topsoil when you start your garden. This native soil here is terrible. If you do have gumbo and you need to sort of break it up, gypsum is very good. Now, gypsum is calcium sulfate, so it is relatively neutral. Limestone, on the other hand, is quite alkaline. And so if you have an acidic soil, you would add limestone to help increase the pH. But this gypsum is a neutral, and it does help improve the quality and texture of the gumbo. Protection. Probably the biggest, most dangerous thing that our hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees have to be protected from are people. Remember that very early slide and how fast the number of species of butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds is declining? Part of this, some of it we don't recognize the caterpillars, we will kill them. A good part of it is how fast is Houston growing? How fast are our cities growing? Concrete does not really support a lot of good native plants. So as our population increases, the amount of native plants becomes limited. Cats. Cats like to play with the caterpillars. They like to play with the hummingbirds. Wasps, spiders, some of the other birds, lizards, ants also can be predators. And caterpillars usually do not pupate on their host plants. They go someplace else. And for example, the monarch caterpillar can travel 30 feet or more. We actually had one that traveled from at least 60 feet, and we found it on a container we used to keep our garden hose in. And while they are traveling through the grass, certainly they are very susceptible to all sorts of predators. So you may actually even want to have some sort of a place for them to pupate near the garden. And also frequently you may even find them on your house. And again, if you don't recognize them, and all of a sudden you see one of these caterpillars on one of your herbs in your garden, and say, oh my gosh, I just killed a future swallowtail. So and some of them can actually form some, try to look like snakes to help protect themselves. So when you see a caterpillar, if you don't recognize it, get out your phone, get the picture, and find out what kind it is before you kill it. And some of them actually almost look like little dots of bird poop or something like that on the trees, especially some of the swallowtails of the citrus tree. And again, in that long article that I have pictures of most of the common butterflies along with their caterpillars and their chrysalis. Hummingbirds. Hummingbirds also need protection. And I don't know if you've noticed this, I'm sure some of you have, but quite frequently the the hummingbird will fly into your window. What happens is it has seen a reflection, it thinks it's another hummingbird, and it'll fly into that glass and can kill itself. So you can do a couple of things. One, place your feeders 15 to 20 feet away from any window. And that definitely helps to reduce the chance that they're going to come to your windows. But again, they may see this reflection and they may still fly to it. You can buy hummingbird feeders, which you can actually attach to your window. And this is when we were having problems. I found this online. That was one of the things that we did was to attach that feeder to the window. And almost immediately it helped resolve the problem. And you would commonly find 2 or 3 hummingbirds sitting on that feeder. And the other thing I think we sometimes forget, yes, the hummingbird, this sugar water is very good, but it is to be used 1/4 of a cup of sugar to 1 cup of water. And in the summer, if you have hummingbirds around, you need to change that water about every 2 to 3 days because it will go bad. And when the fall, winter, when the weather is cooler, probably about 3 to 5 days. And also, I'm sure you're going to find wasps and things like that, bees getting stuck in your hummingbird feeders. So when you change that feed, be sure to very thoroughly clean those feeders. So with that, I'm going to say happy pollinator gardening. And I'd like to open it now for questions and hope that I have stirred up some interest and that you have some questions about this. I'll say particularly about the caterpillars. And in the presentation, also there are some references that you can certainly can look up and find a lot of information.
Does anyone have questions in the chat for Dawn?
I'm curious as to what butterflies most of the those who are listening are interested in. I'm assuming monarch is certainly one of them. What are some of the others?
It doesn't look like we have any comments,
Well,
but oh, someone. Okay. Stephanie said, don't know many outside of monarchs and swallowtails. Trying to learn more.
okay, the queen is quite common around here, and the queen looks quite similar to the monarch. Uh, and again, I said the queen does stay around most of the time, but also the queen, it is the milkweed. The Gulf frilatory is also quite common around here, especially if you have any passion vine. And of course, the swallowtails. And there are, I've seen 3 or 4 different uh, varieties of swallowtails here in our garden. And those are probably the most common.
Okay. Stephanie has another question. How can she tell the difference between a monarch and a queen?
Uh, okay. I don't know if I can get that picture to show up or not. Uh, yeah, let's try this. I'm trying to look for it in that. Yes. Okay. Here it is.
Can you see the screen?
Can you see the screen?
We can see your presentation,
Okay.
the Happy Pollinator Gardening slide.
Okay. We're trying to switch over to another one. Okay, can you see this word screen now?
Yes.
Okay, this is the one I was talking about, and I have done this, I said, sort of for me. I hope I have the pictures in here showing that. Okay, there's the monarch. This sort of shows what's in this thing that I did. The queen. Thought I had, yes, okay. Here it compares the monarch. It has more of the stripes and this sort of thing, where the queen butterfly doesn't have the stripes. They're both orange with some black. And then the caterpillars, the monarch is pretty much sort of a yellowish greenish, and then the queen is more of a has more gray and things in it. And again, I said, if anyone's interested in this, I can certainly make it available to them. It's kind of long, but does have a table of contents, so if you want to look through it without too much trouble. And just very quickly back to
Be sure.
uh,
You want to go back to
no, there are different families of the butterflies, and the bush-footed, for example, these are the ones that are the bush-footed family. The summer-wing butterflies, these are not extremely common, but they are available or around here. The swallowtails are quite common, and these are the black the swallowtails that are fairly common in the area. But those are by far the most common ones would be the swallowtails, and then most of these from the bush-footed family.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And if you take the survey and the pinned comment, we would love to get some feedback on some other topics that you might want to learn about. We do these every second Thursday of the month, and we're always live at 7 for the garden lecture, and we love partnering with the Brazoria Master County Gardeners to bring these lectures to y'all. So thank y'all for joining us tonight, and thank you, Don.
Okay, and if anyone is interested in this, let's put that in the survey, and if you have your email address, I'll email it to you.
Yes.
Or Master Gardeners, I'll also send it up so that you can do that too.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, and have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.